Well, I am 1 minute late today, but that is what should be the case, because I always heard that VIPs, like Lady Gaga, always arrive late for their performances to build up the anticipation. I just got waylaid outside talking about something. So anyway, welcome to today's talk, and one of the things I haven't said much about yet is using some of the wisdom teachings. Because, as people ask during the question time, sometimes that people think, oh, you do samatha, calm the mind, and then you do vipassana, and then you get enlightened, and then they think that's how you meditate. So much so that you know what happens when there's 1 or 2 or 3 different types of meditations, or 2 or 3 different types of teachers, or different forms of retreat centers. People always want to find what is the best. And they start talking after the retreat, I hope. What meditation do you do? And no one said, oh, I do samatha meditation. I did that a long time ago. That doesn't work. I do vipassana meditation. I've done that before. And I don't know why it is that people always want to somehow put one thing forward and negate or stigmatize something else. If you ever read the teachings of the Buddha, you will find, what did the Buddha teach? No, some people, they tell me, vipassana, satipatthana, that is the only way to enlightenment. And you guys doing that samatha rubbish. You might even be reborn in the quiet realms, the jhana realms, for eons, while everybody else is getting enlightened. And that is one of those wonderful things we call the half-truths. So if you want to see what the Buddha said, and you can argue with me, you can argue with somebody else, you can't argue with the Buddha, and it was so clear. In one of the suttas, it's called the Gopaka Moggallana Sutta. It's in the Majjhima Nikaya. And when they asked Ananda, just after the Buddha passed away, that Ananda was the go-to person, because Venerable Ananda, not this Ananda, I mean the monk Ananda, they kept asking him, you've been his attendant for 25 years. And so, you've heard everything. What type of meditation did the Buddha teach and promote? What did he praise? Look it up for yourself, because it's so clear. And Ananda said the Buddha only recommended 4 types of meditation. First jhana, second jhana, third jhana, and fourth jhana. That's all. It's such a direct answer, simple but incredibly powerful. And one of my favorite sayings is from the Dhammapada, Nati jhanang apanyasa, panya nati ajayato, yam hi jhanang chapanya cha sawe nibbana santike. As you get older, you forget a lot of the sayings, but that saying will always be with me because it's powerful. There is no jhana without wisdom. There is no wisdom without jhana, turning it around. But in the one who has jhana and wisdom, they're in the presence of nibbana. They're that close. And that was actually just meant a lot to me. You can see people who had jhana, I mentioned the other day, like Devadatta, jhana but no enough wisdom, so he will not get enlightened. You have people with wisdom, but no jhana, they will not get enlightened. But if you have both, then you're, just so close that, it's just like putting a match next to gunpowder. Something's going to go off. Bang! And that's, how the Buddha taught. And that actually makes it quite important that don't just say, I'm going to get wisdom. See if you can get the Jhana as well, the stillness. And otherwise, people will be arguing and arguing and arguing and arguing. And arguing and arguing and arguing. And that's why, I don't know if I said the first day, the story of the two monks arguing. I think many of you are as old as me, so you probably forgot that as well. These two monks were arguing about reincarnation. Is reincarnation essential, to understand, as a Buddhist monk? Or is it the case that, you've got to be in the present moment, you haven't died yet? So, they argued. And the only way to settle the argument was go and see the teachers. They went to see the Ajahn. And there's, reincarnate one at a time. Reincarnation is really important, rebirth. If we don't believe in rebirth, the whole teaching doesn't make sense. You're all going to die anyway, so why try to get in line? And so the teacher, oh yeah, correct. And so then the second monk came in. So, how can you know about reincarnation? You haven't died yet. You've got to live in the present moment. The present moment is really important. You can't speculate about the future, so reincarnation isn't really important. And the head monk said, yes, correct. And so the second monk went out. The third monk had just talked to him. And then then they said, no, he said, I was right. No, he couldn't have done. He said, I was right. Has that ever happened to you? And you go in to sort of settle a case or something, settle an argument, you go and see, or you come to the interviews after the talk, and you ask Ajahn Brahm about a question. And I say, yes to you. And then someone else asks the total opposite. And I say, yes to you as well. And then you both come in together. You say, you said yes to him, and then you said yes to me. No, we can't both be right. And the head monk said, yes, that's right. And I kind of like that, because that ends up all arguments. So what's behind all of that? What's behind all of that is Ajahn Chah would always say, if a person's leaning to the left, he would push them to the right. If they're leaning to the right, he'd push them to the left. There seems to be opposite answers. But if you understand the bigger picture, you can understand that they're both right, correct answers. And that reminds me of the story about, this is from Nasruddin, the Sufi. This was in the 13th century, a long time ago. And so he had a business. He was transporting salt from place to place on donkeys. And his son, his young son, was helping him. But his son, like many children, I'm sure you have children, you can recognize this, was always really rebellious. So if the donkey was crossing a bridge and the donkey was leaning to the left and close to falling in, the father would tell his son, push that donkey more to the left. And the son would always rebel against his dad, so push it to the right. And thereby it would actually balance and get over. It was leaning to the right, push it to the right. And the son would push it to the left. And that's how he managed to get a good business. But one day, the donkey was leaning to the left, and the father said, push it to the left. And for the first time in years, the son actually pushed the donkey to the left. And the donkey fell in and lost all the salt. What did you do that for? Said the father to the son. And the son said, Daddy, don't you remember today's my birthday? I'm 20 today, I'm no longer a teenager. And I kind of like that story. If you think teenagers these days, and in your day as well, they were the same. So anyway, and if you say, oh no, not me, you're in denial. And if the donkeys were crossing the river in Egypt, they would be in denial. Okay, that's really pushy, isn't it? They say that Moses was the first therapist because he was found in denial. I better stop this, come on. Be serious. Anyway, when we meditate, and sometimes that's the one thing with the meditations where you get very still and peaceful. You can't really argue about that. You know if you're very still and peaceful, because it's an experience rather than a description, rather than a theory. And that's one of the reasons why all these signs you have if you're really still. You can't feel your body, but your mind is alive and awake. And afterwards, especially, because sometimes people do get confused. They're getting peaceful in meditation, and they think that, is this going to sleep? Is it unconsciousness? Is it going to trance? They're not quite sure what's happening inside, and you come out afterwards. It's the afterglow is where you know whether it was a deep meditation or not. The afterglow means you're not so dull or sleepy. You're really bright and happy and clear. And the deeper you go, the brighter the happiness is, the clearer it is, and the more you are like walking on air. And it's also that when you come out of a good meditation, that's when you have these amazing abilities. No, well, not really that amazing, but they should be called amazing. The ability to see things, to have real insight. The food tastes more delicious, not just a baked bean. Whatever you put into your mouth. If you had a good meditation, please eat slowly and enjoy it. Just want one spoon or one morsel of rice. And you can really explore it. It's in your mouth. It's the reacting with the saliva, and you maybe chew it, and you feel it. You feel that much more than you've ever done before. And not only that, this is a beautiful place. You just look at the stones on the stupa. That stupa, that's from the stone from the same area as Borobudur, the same stone that they made Borobudur out of hundreds of years ago. It's another volcanic stone, from central Java. And you can look at it, and you can feel it, you can touch it. When you touch it, you can feel it so much more than when you're not got great mindfulness. What that stillness is doing, that is enhancing and strengthening your mindfulness. It's one of the reasons when mindfulness became popular, and people started having mindfulness groups and mindfulness centers and making lots of money out of mindfulness books. The one thing which they never talked about was just what happens when the mindfulness gets strong. And I made a point, and when I wrote books about mindfulness, to say there's ordinary mindfulness and there's power mindfulness, there's superpower mindfulness. Now, even a drunk going home from the pub has got some mindfulness. They find their way home. How they do that is weird, but they manage to find their way home. So they've got some awareness, but it's very, very limited. But as you still the mind, your mindfulness gets stronger and stronger and stronger. It becomes more powerful. It's one of the reasons why that when you say do your walking meditation, you do your walking meditation very slowly. I just was watching somebody as I was coming in the hall now, they're doing their walking meditation, and they were going so slowly. And I remembered a story of this young boy, and I think his parents were really interested in meditation. They came here and they asked me, can I have permission, please, to just go and have a visit to Jhana Grove, just have a see, not to do anything. I'm not going to be noisy, we just want to have a look. So if you can be quiet and peaceful, fine. So they came in here during one of the retreats, not this one, some time ago, and they had a look. And when they went back to Jhana Grove, their boy was just really anxious. Said, Ajahn Brahm, I need to tell you this. So what do you need to tell me? I've just been to your retreat center. It's been invaded by zombies. By zombies? Why? Because I saw all these people walking really slowly. Because apparently that's what zombies do. They walk very slow. And that's what happens, isn't it? Sometimes you do slow walking meditation, and we call that zombie meditation. That's only making a bit of joy and fun out of it, but it's just what happens naturally. You've got so many things happening. And of course, many of you, I'm sure, I hope you've experienced that when you're walking. There's so much stuff happening. You can't go fast. You have to slow down. Otherwise you'll miss too much. And you just lift your foot up. Wow. Just move it backwards. Move it forward. So it's great when you do that, but you have to adapt. Because I remember going to this conference. We used to go to lots of conferences. And in this conference, I had the breakout sessions. So, discuss this subject, discuss that subject. And they always had like a leader. And one of these nuns, not our nuns are really well behaved. Sometimes, are they? Yeah, of course, you're always well behaved. One of the nuns was the leader of one of these groups. And so they were all on the panel at the front. And then the MC said, now would the leader of the panel were talking about this, please go to the microphone and report on what was discussed. So this nun, she got up very slowly, very mindfully, and she moved her chair back. She picked up her papers. So aware, she picked them up and turned around and started walking to the chair. And as she was walking, you could see that she was lifting up her heel and then the other part of the foot and moving forward, mindful all the time. And she took so much time getting to the microphone. The MC, time allotted, finished. Now go back. Imagine if you did that slow walking meditation when you were crossing on the pedestrian crossing in, say, St. George's Terrace, and you're lifting your foot quietly as the green man turned to red and you're only a quarter way across when you get caught in the traffic. There's a time for doing the walking meditation, but sometimes slow. But this is just naturally what happens. It's no one's fault. You're seeing so much. Your ability to see and to hear and to taste and to feel is enhanced. And that's a sign, a sure sign, that your stillness is actually creating a very strong insight, very strong mindfulness, which you can use for great insight. And the wonderful thing is that you don't have to choose where you put that mindfulness, because the insight is all around you. Even, like I often say, in the floor. One thing about this bamboo floor here, you've been sitting on it for about 4 or 5 days. Have you noticed how beautiful it is? There's no two of those planks are the same. They're not just printed out in some factory. It's real bamboo, which has been cut, glued together, and put into these planks. And if you look at it, it's gorgeous. Your ability to perceive increases. And the weird part is that what you see is not more faults, but more beauty, more things which are delightful. Of course, the faults are there, but when the mind gets very strong, it tends to see the beauty and the harmony and the richness of the colors. That's the nature of the mind. It loses its fault-finding quality, and it sees that this is really interesting and fascinating to look at. So, first of all, you start to notice, what is sort of the negativity? What causes it? Something which took me a long time to understand, but this is experience. I thought the more you will see, the more you will see dukkha, and you get more and more miserable. Actually, that's not how it works. You do see the dukkha, but by seeing it, there's a lot of happiness, a lot of joy, a lot of peace. I couldn't understand that at first, because I was always told that, especially as a monk or a nun, you're supposed to look miserable. When I went to Hong Kong years ago, I'm just Ajahn Brahm, which you know me, I don't change if I go to a different place. When I went to Hong Kong to teach, at the end of the talk, or end of quite a few talks, a little retreat, one of these elderly nuns, elderly Mahayana nuns, came up to me and said, thank you so much for coming to our temple. And of course I asked why. And she said, before you came, I was not allowed to smile or laugh. If I did, they said, take that smile off your face, you're a nun, you're serious, you're not allowed to smile or laugh. I said, what? I said, but since you came, Ajahn Brahm, they saw you smiling and laughing and saying wise things, so now I'm allowed to smile and laugh. Strange. I couldn't understand it at first, because sometimes people feel that this path of meditation and enlightenment is serious stuff. And the more serious you are, the faster you will get enlightened. So don't smile. Sit, endure pain. And there's so much time the Buddha said, no, be inspired. And one of the nice things was that when you were with someone like an Ajahn Chah, the first years in public, he wouldn't smile. When all the public had gone home, and the monks were talking to him, then he'd smile and tell funny stories, tell jokes from the past. He told some wonderful stories. Like one of those stories, so many of them, but okay. This story, he didn't tell this because I was there when it happened. This is Ajahn Chah and his humour. There was this time, I'm just going to change the story because this was an important story and it also has a lot of wisdom behind it. When meditation started becoming well known in the world, and Sweden, which is always a very progressive country, Sweden got a professor, paid a professor to go and visit South and Southeast Asia, all the famous meditation teachers he could find, and ask the same set of questions to do a research for the Swedish government. And of course Ajahn Chah was one of those people he came to see. This was maybe 40 years ago. And when this professor came, because he came sponsored by the Swedish government, he was like a VIP visitor. And so when he came, Ajahn Chah gave him just the full treatment. How are you? Made sure he was sitting comfortably, and then asked what he wanted. And then the Swedish professor, through an interpreter, said he had 4 questions to ask Ajahn Chah. And this is where Ajahn Chah started to play around. Because he asked somebody, he said, oh really, questions from the Swedish government. Can I please have a piece of paper and a pencil? I've never seen him do that before. I don't think he's done it since. He'd always just speak the answers, not just write them down. And so he got a piece of paper and a pencil and said, yes, what are the questions? And the professor said, the 4 questions are, what is meditation? How do you meditate? Why do you meditate? Or what do you get out of meditation? Those are the 4 questions. I said, those 4 questions, they were translated, okay. And he wrote them down, looked all serious. And then he gave it back to the translator. When the translator stopped laughing, the translator said, my master's answer to your first question, what is meditation? Ajahn Chah's answer is, what is eating? The answer to your second question, why do you meditate? His answer is, why do you eat? The third question, what do you get out of, no, how do you meditate? You got the answer, how do you eat? Do you actually go to different eating classes? And when you go, is there different ways of eating in this place? Like fast eating, slow eating, mindful eating, backward eating, walking, eating, meditation, sitting, lying down, eating, meditation. And lastly, what do you get out of meditation? What do you get out of eating? And the professor, like professors often, they don't really understand that much. That's why they're professors. Any professors here? That's why one of the nuns' brothers, he was the one who said, when you get a PhD, you should understand what PhD means. It's permanent head damage. He had a PhD himself. But anyway, those are very profound answers. They were full of insight. Simple answers, but sometimes their simplicity can confuse you that they're not deep. Because has anyone ever taught you how to eat? They're manners, but you actually experience that eating. Well, why do you eat? You need to eat not too much, not too little. The food which is good for you. You don't all do the same meditation practice. No more you all eat the same type of food. What is good for you? What suits you? How much? And when? And what do you get out of eating? You get this health, this energy, so that you can serve whatever purpose you have in this life. Whether it's to meditate, or to teach, or whether it's to work, or whatever else is your job in life. That's the purpose of food. That's the purpose of meditation. It's one of the reasons why it was Ajahn Chah who coined the word food for the heart. That's meditation. Good food for the heart, or the mind if you wish to call it the mind, is that which keeps you really healthy and strong and insightful. That's one of the reasons why you can eat food here, which means you can walk and you keep healthy, but it's the meditation which keeps the mind healthy. I don't know about you, but unfortunately some days I get very busy doing this and doing that for others, and then sometimes you don't meditate that much. When you don't meditate that much, honestly, and I think the nuns here would agree with this, you feel sick. I don't mean sick that you're going to vomit or anything, but you don't have the same energy and clarity which you'd normally have. You meditate a lot, and your mind becomes really strong and healthy. Why? It's because it's got the energy, it's got the joy, and it's got the power to actually just see clearly. It has the insight. It's one of the reasons why when Ajahn Chah did say those stories, they were insightful, but they were also funny. And that was why I remembered them very easily. One of the other funny insights which he had, but it's a gross story, but please don't just judge it because it's gross. Just judge it because it's very powerful. And this was in the back of a car. Ajahn Chah was in the passenger seat. There was a driver and there was 3 Westerners. I remember I was one of them. This novice Gary was another, and his translator Ajahn Prabhakara was the third. And as we were driving from monastery into town to go to the railway station, Ajahn Chah turned around and looked at the novice, Gary, and said to him, "You're thinking about your girlfriend back in LA, aren't you?" And his face went red, his jaw dropped. Ajahn Chah could read minds, and you had to be very, very careful what you were thinking when he was around. I felt so sorry for this Gary because he'd been busted. But then, when he was wondering what to say next, Ajahn Chah said, "We can help you." Because monks, we are compassionate. And especially great Ajahn Chah, very, very compassionate and very skillful at all sorts of very wonderful means to solve these sorts of problems for a young monk. And he said, "Next time you write to your girlfriend back in Los Angeles, please ask your girlfriend to please send something of hers, something personal, something intimate, so that when you miss her, you can get it out and have a look at it. It'll take away just, your longing." And even I was shocked at that. Is that allowable once you're in brown robes? I know that sometimes you do that as a lay life, somebody goes overseas, you have like a lock of her hair or a piece of her dress with a scent on or something. But as a monk, and I just say, yeah, out of compassion, it's okay. But he said, don't get a piece of her dress or a lock of her hair or anything like that. Ask her for a little bottle about this size. You've heard this story before, haven't you? And ask her to put in a sample of her shit. Her feces. Plenty. And that's pretty intimate and personal. And I'm sure you've done this, remember when you were young, when you say you meet someone, you fall in love. "I love everything about you, my darling." Everything? Oh dear, indeed. And so when you miss her, you can open it up. Whoa. And that'll soon overcome your longing. It's true. Be careful if you're young people. I actually do tell this to young people. Don't squeeze, your love too much. It's like a toothpaste tube. You squeeze it too much, you don't know what's going to come out the end. Don't encourage me further, please. But a lot of time, that wisdom did have a sense of humour to it as well. But as often those funny stories of insight, they were some of the most powerful. One of the other insight stories from Ajahn Chah I teach here. I'm just wondering if I still got the little stick. Ajahn Chah once, coming back from alms round, that I was holding his bowl. And that's the service we do. It's great doing service for people like an Ajahn Chah, because he always will give back in his great insights. So he just stooped down and picked up a stick from the forest floor. And he asked me, is this stick heavy? Before I could answer, no, don't pick it up. Why are you trying to pick it up? It's quite happy down there. He threw it down. And then he asked me, it's only heavy when you hold it. And you can understand what he was saying there. All the stuff which you have in life, all your burdens, your duties, your responsibilities, some of you have got more than others. You've always got some duties and responsibilities. They're only heavy when you keep holding it. I thought, wow. So, my responsibilities and duties. What am I supposed to do today? I'm not quite sure. But anyway, I'm spiritual dictator, spiritual director of the BSWA. I've got to do all these things which I haven't done yet for them. The abbot of Bodhinyana Monastery, whatever the monks are doing over there, I'm not quite sure. And also, how do you get me to do this, Venerable Chanda? You got me as the chairman of the Anukampa Bhikkhuni Trust. Is that right? Yeah. Also the honorary treasurer of the Australia Sangha Association, spiritual advisor of the Buddhist Society of Victoria, and we're building a big meditation retreat centre over there. I'm also the spiritual director of the Cambodian Buddhist Society over in Kelmscott. I'm also, I don't know what I am. They give you all these responsibilities and duties. How can you do that? I'm a simple living monk. How you do that? Please, Mrs. Vice President, please do not tell the committee what I'm saying right now. I'm only temporary. I'm a temporary spiritual director. I'm only spiritual director when I have to be. I'm the abbot when I have to be, which is as little as possible. Because when you hold your burdens, then they are really heavy. When you pick them up when they need to be picked up, it's not a problem at all. I would do this with the stick. This is insight. And I leave it down there. It's happy down there. Maybe. Sometimes I pick something up and I ask you, this is teachings on insight. What is this I'm holding? Please, you can answer. You can speak. It's an opportunity to take your mask off, speak, and then put it back on again. What is it?
Ball.
Yeah, what else?
Bell.
What else? What else?
Metal.
What else? Come on, what else?
Heavy.
What else?
Pattern.
What else?
Pictures.
What else? What else?
Shiny.
What else? What else?
Smooth.
After a while, you actually, all those names you just gave, they're just so ordinary names. You've heard those before. It's what you've been taught at school, what you see in Wikipedia or on dictionaries or whatever. What is this? After you have dispensed with all the usual understandings, then you can start to see something unique, something which people haven't seen before. You have to be still enough to look for long enough for this thing to open out to you and tell you its secrets. You also have to be courageous enough to see things you haven't seen before. Go out of your comfort zone. That is a process of insight. To look long enough, still enough, to be able to allow this to teach you. And it's not that there is a final answer to what this is. It's how it gets used. What purpose you can give this to. So often, if there's a wind, it's a lovely paperweight. Sometimes if you see a little bug, like, we do have things like little scorpions here or something. If you see a scorpion, it doesn't kill it, it just keeps it nice and quiet for a while until, you finish your talk. So sometimes this is an example of what insight is. To have a still enough mind, you can actually see more uses, more meaning in some of the ordinary things which we have in life. Like Ajahn Brahm, stick is only heavy when you keep holding it. And these are things which actually affect your life. You. I know, are you wise? Are you a good person? Are you perfect? And sometimes as a monk, I don't know why, you have to do things like marriage counselling. I don't know why people ask me. I'm not a monk. I've never been married. What would I know about marriage counselling? But I do remember these two Thai ladies years ago. They were sisters, and they came up to me for marriage counselling. I think it's because I'm cheap. When they came up, and the elder sister spoke first. The eldest sister was in one of these marriages where she wasn't happy. She was not really being respected, and just the kindness, compassion seemed to have gone out of the marriage. So, I was giving her all sorts of advice, but she was basically just wanted to get separated and divorced. And then her younger sister, what's your problem? And she said her problem that, she was a young lady, attractive, but she could not find a partner. All of her sort of prospective partners, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and it all fell apart. It was wrong. I want to get married to somebody, and I want to have a long-lasting relationship, but I just can't. Why not? So the answer to me was obvious. Your sisters, you grow up together, you share. Your eldest sister's got a husband she doesn't want. You want one. Swap. It's logical to me, a monk. I thought that was really wise. But then just, unfortunately, their mindfulness and understanding wasn't strong enough to accept it. Anyway. So these days, if anyone comes up for marriage counselling, I say, I've known both of them usually. That's why they come and say hello to me. And I say, look at you. Your husband, what are his faults? What are the wrong things, bad things he does? He comes up with this list of all of his faults and failings. And I ask the husband, what about your wife? What's her faults and failings? And he comes also up with a list. So you both got lots of faults and failings. You're a match. They don't accept that. That's why one of those little books which was printed in Indonesia. They had this. It's actually based on a Buddhist story. This guy, he was young, and he was rich, and he'd done a lot in his life already. But he thought, now is the time to find a partner in life. But he didn't want to find any old partner. So he went around looking for the most beautiful girl sort of in the place where he stayed. And he found this really beautiful woman. I mean, she was really should have been like a model, on some big company, like, I don't know, what company, I don't know, become like Prada? Is that, yeah, like some model for Prada or something. And then he sort of, he took her out, but then found out that, she couldn't cook. She was hopeless with food. So he thought, no, I just want a girl who's a really good cook. So he dropped her and he went to another place and found this second lady. She was not just a brilliant cook, she just had her own restaurant. And many people went there, and she was also very attractive. So he said, she's the one I'm going to marry. And then she, it's fair in the end, don't worry, it's not just not respectful of the other genders. So then she started talking to her. She's a great cook, very beautiful. But then she was not intelligent. She couldn't even just have a conversation about almost anything. All she knew about was food. She thought, well, I don't just eat all day. So he dropped her. And then he found this other lady who was the most perfect lady he could ever imagine. Very beautiful, great cook, had 3 PhDs. And then when he was ready to propose to her, she turned him down. She was a perfect lady, but she was looking for the perfect guy. And that's not him. So a lot of times we fantasize about things. We're not really wise enough. And I do also recall just talking a bit more sense into not young people, middle-aged people, old people, or whatever. If you do want a partner in life, what type of partner do you want? I remember doing this to a group of 17 or 18-year-olds in Kuala Lumpur. And first of all, the ladies, what type of person would you want? And they said, someone I can trust, someone who speaks kindly, somebody doesn't take alcohol or drugs. That really turns us off, because that just again is someone I can't trust. They don't have to be that rich, but they have to be kind. I said also they'd like to be smiley and make them happy. When I asked one gender that, I asked the other gender, they said exactly the same. So what makes one attractive in life is your kindness and your goodness. Little things, I said, like keeping 5 precepts. That makes you trustworthy. It makes you happy and kind. Little things like that are little insights. Good looks, wealth or something, that doesn't last. That's why I said that in Singapore. I'm going to get into more trouble now. I said in Singapore, if you want your kids to find a nice partner in life, make sure that your daughters never marry a rich man. And make sure your sons never marry a beautiful girl. Marry an ugly girl. Marry a poor boy. There's a lot of wisdom in that. Do you understand it? Because if you marry an ugly girl, then you can go off to do a retreat in Jhana Grove, and you don't have to feel jealous or worry about what your beautiful wife is doing, because she's an ugly wife, and so no one will want her, so she'll be there very happy for when you come home. If you marry a rich guy, especially in Singapore, you don't know what he gets up to when you're away on a retreat. But when he's poor, he can't afford anybody else. So you've got nothing to worry about. I thought that was really wise. So when you go home and you've got some kids and they're looking for a partner in life, please tell them, daughter, never marry a rich guy. Son, don't marry a beautiful woman. Marry an ugly one. Is that a good idea? That's one of the reasons I never got married. And I don't really know what I'm talking about. I've just been reading your minds. But anyway, just the inside of wisdom, a lot of it is like seeing things in a different way, which other people haven't seen before. It's not seeing things the same old way. Now, what is beauty? What is happiness? What is actually worth doing in your life? Why spend 9 days on a meditation retreat? And after a while, many people in the world may not understand what you're doing, but they'll understand it when you go home and they see just how peaceful and happy you are. Why? What you've been doing is been understanding things like dukkha and its opposite. How can you understand what suffering is if you don't know its opposite, the happiness and the peace? How do you know what attachment is unless you know how to let things go and not hold things? How can you know just how life changes and never stays the same? Why are you worried about things? A lot of times, whatever you're worried about, it changes by itself. And there's so many times on these retreats, sometimes people come and they've got really big problems. You may know him, but I hope I don't sort of embarrass him. A fellow just on one of these retreats a year ago, he had a brain tumor. And neurosurgeon said you've only got, basically 2 choices: do nothing and die, or just have an operation and be on steroids for the rest of your life. And even the operation is not guaranteed to be a success. And both options, were not attractive at all. But he chose another option, to come on one of these retreats. And he came last, I think, November, and said thank you, because he didn't have the operation, didn't take any steroids. He just meditated and found out after so many months, when the neurosurgeon gave him another scan, it's gone. The tumor has disappeared, it's vanished. Thank you. There's all sorts of different ways of doing things. How on earth can that work? That's why I say sometimes it's good to be courageous. Good to understand the future is uncertain. You don't know which way it's going to go. And you cannot predict it that well. But in the meantime, don't hold that worry and concern about your health. Don't worry and hold concern about COVID. It's one of the reasons why that when Robin and the other meditators here, or the other managers, sorry, when they said, there was a case of COVID here, then please don't get worried. The chances of other people catching it are minimal. That's why the government does not compel you to end the retreat and all go into quarantine. It'd be nice if they did, because then I could go into quarantine in my cave. What a good idea. But no, sometimes it's the worry which is the worst. And this is one of the things we can see through when we are on a retreat. All that fear, how many things you've worried about and were afraid of, how many of those things actually came true? And of course, that one of those little stories is, one of the most helpful ones, which I remember seeing on the TV show about Kung Fu. And that was where a little grasshopper, who's training to be a monk, and part of the training was to be taken into this very dark room where there was what looked like an indoor swimming pool. But you went closer to the edge of that swimming pool and you could see bones, skulls and arms and skeletons in the bottom of that pool. And that's when the master said, "It's not water, little grasshopper, that's acid, concentrated acid." and there is a piece of wood, a plank, stretching from one end of the swimming pool to the other. So in 7 days' time, like every trainee monk has to walk across that plank from one side of the pool of acid to the other side. And we don't want you to fall in, because you can see what happened to the little novices who fell in. Got all their bones that are still down there. So he said, what I want to make sure you do is to train. There was another plant exactly the same size out in the courtyard on 2 bricks. But as you should know, a plank over acid is much longer, even if it's the same size, as a plank over the hard concrete floor of the courtyard. So little grasshopper trained for a week. And he could walk blindfolded over that plank. When it came to the plank over the acid, and the master told him to cross it, it was very difficult for little grasshopper. He started to, you could see he was very scared. He started to wobble, and then to sway, and then he fell in. And when he fell in, Master started laughing. And little grasshopper was flailing his arms up and down and realizing it wasn't acid after all, it was just ordinary water. And the master asked him, why did you fall in? You fell in because of fear. Fear pushed you in. You thought it was acid, and that's why you fell. A lot of times, whenever you're meditating, if you're afraid, then insight can't actually come up. You're afraid of peace. You're afraid of things you don't know. They put the bones down there just as visual effects, just to make it look scary. It was a dark room, so you couldn't really see clearly that it was water, not acid. Fear. What you're afraid of, you usually make happen, one way or another. So the insights are something which overcomes those problems. And instead of seeing what you're afraid of, even, oh my goodness, you see just all these little animals over in places like Bodhinyana Monastery, or like in Thailand. You had all these animals, like the centipedes, or the animals which I really loved, I must admit this, over in northeast of Thailand, were the tarantulas. Because they'd be on the roof rafters, and sometimes they'd fall off. And they'd fall on me. They never ever would bite me, sting me, but they'd come on, big tarantulas. They go boom, 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 boom. And they walk all over me. It was really tickly. For a monk who didn't have any sensory pleasures or ways of getting sensory pleasures, that tarantulas, it was really quite pleasant. Honest. So sometimes if I was afraid of them, then I probably would tense up, and of course they would sort of bite you. So a lot of times, what we're afraid of, and just the last little story, and again one of the other stories which I wrote about in a book, about this gentleman who had a motorbike accident here in Perth. He was like an artist, a painter, really quite well known. But after, he woke up in hospital with the bad news that he'd had to have his hand amputated because of the injuries. And so he realized he didn't have a hand. And that was the hand which he painted with. It's like his life didn't know what to do anymore. So he decided as soon as he could, he would commit suicide. So when he got released from hospital, he went up to one of the big office blocks over in St. George's Terrace, found an office which was unoccupied, got in there, went into the balcony and was about to jump off to his death. But what he saw down below on the street was this man with no arms at all. And he was dancing up and down the street for joy. And he thought, why am I so negative? I've only lost a hand. This guy's got no arms. No left hand, right arm, or elbows or anything. Why am I thinking of killing myself when this guy's got no arms at all? Look at him, he's dancing up and down for joy. So he decided to give up the idea of suicide, ran to the elevator, got down straight away and ran after this guy. He could catch up with him, he noticed him pretty quickly, caught up with him and said, please, you saved my life. I've lost a hand, it's very important to me, it's my painting hand. And you've just got no arms at all, you're dancing along the street for joy. What's your secret? And the man with no arms said, so I'm not dancing up and down for joy, I just got an itchy bum. That's the only way I could scratch it. Okay, I think I'm going to finish that now. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.